"You're more wonderful than those flowers," he said. The alien queen couldn't stop smiling. Stars looked different. From the bridge of the human ship Harmony, Ambassador Marcus Chen stood at the large window, watching the green and blue planet grow larger. As they approached, Viridian Prime looked like a giant emerald floating in space, covered with swirling clouds that sparkled in the sunlight. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes. Ambassador," Captain Rodriguez said from behind him. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus touched the small communication device on his belt. It was loaded with every language program the humans had, but he knew it might not be enough. The Chlorophyll Confederation had turned away every alien diplomat who had tried to visit their world. The plant people were known throughout the galaxy as skilled gardeners, but most aliens thought they were too simple to be worth talking to. "As ready as anyone can be," Marcus replied. He had spent his whole life studying plants before becoming a diplomat. If anyone could understand these beings, he hoped it would be him. The ship landed softly in a clearing surrounded by the most beautiful forest Marcus had ever seen. The trees were tall and silver, with leaves that seemed to glow with their own light. Flowers of every color imaginable covered the ground, and the air smelled sweet like honey and fresh rain. Marcus stepped off the ship wearing his best diplomatic uniform. The gravity felt lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like a small bounce around him. The forest was alive with soft musical sounds, like wind chimes mixed with gentle singing. "Stay close to the ship," Captain Rodriguez called after him. "We don't know what to expect." But Marcus was already walking toward a path that seemed to be made of living crystal. Small lights danced along its edges, leading deeper into the forest. He had read that the chlorophyll people built their cities to work with nature, not against it. Now he could see what that meant. The path wound between massive flower gardens that seemed perfect. To be real, Marcus saw roses the size of dinner, plates growing next to delicate orchids that moved like they were dancing in a gentle breeze. There were plants he had never seen before, some with leaves that looked like they were made of glass, others with flowers that opened and closed in slow, steady rhythms like they were breathing. As he walked, Marcus noticed small figures moving. Between the plants, they looked almost human, but their skin had a green tint that reminded him of young tree bark. Their hair seemed to be made of thin vines with tiny flowers woven through it. When they moved, soft lights flickered across their skin in patterns that looked like messages. The plant people watched Marcus, but did not come close. Some pointed at him, and their skin lights flashed faster. Marcus wondered if they were talking about him, and if so, what they were saying. The crystal path led to the most amazing sight Marcus had ever seen. A city rose from the forest floor, but it looked like it had grown there naturally. Buildings were made from living trees whose branches had been shaped into walls and roofs. Bridges were grown from thick vines that spanned between the tree buildings. Everything glowed with soft, natural light. In the center of the city stood a palace that took Marcus's breath away. It was built round the largest tree he had ever seen, so big that its trunk could have held a small town. The tree's branches formed rooms and walkways, while its roots created a natural foundation that spread out in all directions. Marcus walked toward the palace, still following the crystal path. More plant people appeared along the way, watching him with curious expressions. Their skin lights flashed in complex patterns that reminded Marcus of fireflies. On a summer evening back on Earth. At the palace entrance, the tall guards stood waiting. They looked more like walking trees than people, with bark like skin and eyes that glowed like gold and honey. When they saw Marcus, they made a sound like rustling leaves and stepped aside to let him pass. The inside of the palace was even more beautiful than the outside. The walls were alive, covered with vines and flowers that provided soft, natural lighting. The floor felt springy under Marcus's feet, like walking on thick moss. Everything smelled fresh and clean, like a garden after morning rain. Marcus followed a corridor that curved gently upward, leading him toward what he guessed was the throne room. Along the way, he passed rooms filled with incredible plants. Some had flowers that seemed to sing in harmony with each other. Others had leaves that changed colors in waves, like rainbow waterfalls made of light. Finally, Marcus reached a large circular room at the heart of the palace. In the center grew a throne made from living vines and branches, covered with the most beautiful flowers he had ever seen. Sitting on the throne was a figure that could only be the queen. She was taller than the other plant people Marcus had seen, with skin that had a deeper green color and golden highlights that seemed to flow like slow lightning. Her hair was made of flowering vines that moved gently around her shoulders. Most amazing of all were her eyes. They were the deep green of old forests, filled with an intelligence that made Marcus feel like she could see right through him. The queen's skin was covered with flowing patterns of light that were more complex than any Marcus had seen. She was watching him carefully, and he had the feeling that she was judging whether he was worth her time. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward. He had practiced this moment many times, but now his heart was beating fast with nervousness. This was humanity's only chance to make friends with the Chlorophyll Confederation. He took another step toward the throne, trying to look confident and peaceful. But as he moved forward, his foot came down on something soft and delicate. There was a tiny musical sound, like a bell being broken. Marcus looked down in horror. Under his boot was a small, white flower that had been glowing with soft moonlight. Now it was crushed, its light fading quickly. The entire throne room fell silent. Even the singing flowers stopped their music. The queen's light patterns froze on her skin, and her golden eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression he could not read. Marcus realized he had just made the worst possible first impression. The silence in the throne room felt heavy like a thick blanket. Marcus looked at the crushed flower under his boot, then at the queen's frozen expression. Her golden eyes seemed to burn with disappointment, and the light patterns on her skin had turned a deep red color that probably meant anger. Most diplomats would have started making excuses or apologies right away. But Marcus was not like most diplomats. He was a scientist first, and scientists always looked closer when something went wrong. Instead of stepping back, Marcus carefully knelt down beside the broken flower. He gently lifted his foot and examined the delicate white petals that were now scattered on the moss-like floor. The flower had been beautiful. Its petals were thin like paper, but seemed to glow with their own moonlight, Solenicerius nocturnus. Marcus whispered to himself, using the scientific name for night-blooming flowers. But this was different from anything he had seen on Earth. The petals had tiny veins that still flickered with fading light, like a dying computer circuit. The queen's light patterns flickered with surprise. Most aliens who had visited her world barely looked at her people's plants, thinking them simple decorations. But this human was studying the damaged flower like it was the most important thing in the universe. Marcus touched one of the broken petals very gently. The cellular structure is still active. He said softly, talking to the flower as if it could hear him. These light channels, they're like fiber optic cables, but biological. Amazing. He reached into his diplomatic bag and pulled out a small tool that looked like a tiny flashlight. When he turned it on, it cast a soft blue light over the broken flower. Marcus held it steady and watched as the flower's petals began to respond to the light, their veins glowing a little brighter. Photosynthetic healing response. Marcus said with wonder in his voice, "You're trying to repair yourself, aren't you?" He looked up at the queen. "Your Majesty, this flower, it's not just beautiful, it's incredibly complex. The way it uses light for both energy and communication." The queen tilted her head, and her light patterns changed from red to yellow. Marcus noticed that the patterns were not random. They moved in mathematical sequences that reminded him of the golden ratio. He had studied in plant growth patterns back on Earth. Marcus pulled out another device from his bag, a small computer tablet. He quickly pulled up a program that could create light patterns and began copying what he saw on the queen's skin. His version was crude and simple, but it followed the same mathematical rules. When Marcus's device flashed a basic pattern, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, the queen's eyes widened with surprise. She sat forward on her throne, and her own patterns changed to match his, but much more complex and beautiful. "Fibonacci sequences," Marcus said with excitement. You're using mathematical language based on natural growth patterns. This is incredible. For the first time since Marcus had arrived, the queen made a sound. It was like wind chimes mixed with gentle laughter, and it filled the throne room with music. The other flowers began singing again, as if her laughter had given them permission to continue their songs. The queen stood up from her throne and walked toward Marcus. She was even taller than he had thought, graceful like a tree moving in a gentle breeze. When she reached him, she knelt down beside the broken flower too. She touched the damaged petals, and her skin began to glow brighter. The light traveled from her fingers into the flower, and Marcus watched in amazement as the broken parts began to slowly mend themselves. It was not magic. It was biology more advanced than anything humans had discovered. You can share your life energy, Marcus said with wonder. Your people are connected to your plants on a cellular level. The queen looked at Marcus with new interest. She stood up and made a gesture for him to follow her. Together, they walked out of the throne room and into a corridor that Marcus had not seen before. This passage led to a private garden that was even more beautiful than anything Marcus had seen in the city. Here, every plant seemed to be perfectly placed, creating a symphony of colors and lights that danced together in harmony. There were flowers that looked like stars, trees with silver bark that sang in low, musical tones, and vines that created natural bridges over small streams of glowing water. The queen walked slowly through her garden, touching different plants as she passed. Each one responded to her touch with brighter colors or happier songs. Marcus realized that this was not just a garden. It was a living conversation between the queen and every plant in it. This is your private sanctuary, Marcus said softly. You're not just their ruler. You're connected to all of them. The queen nodded and began using her light patterns to tell him more. Even though Marcus could only understand basic parts of her language, he could see that she was sharing something important with him. She led him to a bench made from living wood and sat down, patting the space next to her for Marcus to join her. As they sat together, Marcus began telling her about Earth's gardens. He showed her pictures on his tablet, his grandmother's rose garden that had inspired his love of plants, the great forests of the Amazon, the cherry blossoms in Japan. For each picture, he tried to copy the queen's light language to describe how beautiful they were. The queen watched with fascination as Marcus shared his world with her. She began to understand that humans, like her people, could appreciate the deep beauty and complexity of plant life. This alien was not like the others who had come before. He saw plants as living, thinking beings worthy of respect. As the two suns of Viridian Prime began to set, casting golden light through the garden, the queen's expression grew sad. Her light patterns turned a deep blue color that made Marcus think of sadness or worry. She stood up and led Marcus to the center of her garden, where a massive tree grew. It was even larger than the palace tree, with a trunk so wide that 20 people holding hands could not reach around it. But something was wrong. Marcus could see dark patches on the tree's bark, and many of its leaves were yellow and falling. The tree's light was dim and flickering, like a candle about to go out. The queen touched the tree's bark, and her own lights dimmed to match it. She looked at Marcus with tears in her golden eyes, and even without understanding her full language, Marcus knew what she was telling him. This great tree was dying, and so was she. Marcus stared at the massive dying tree, his mind racing with possibilities. The queen's sadness filled the air around them like a heavy fog. But Marcus had spent his life solving problems that others thought were impossible. I need to examine it, Marcus said, pulling out his scientific tools. May I touch the tree? The queen's light patterns flashed with alarm. She made sounds like rustling leaves and shook her head quickly. Through her basic light language, Marcus understood that touching the world tree was forbidden. Only the queen and her highest priests were allowed to make contact with it. Your Majesty, Marcus said gently, I know this is against your customs, but I'm a scientist on my world. We believe that understanding comes from careful study. If I can't examine the tree, I can't help it. The queen looked torn between hope and fear. Her light patterns swirled with different colors as she struggled with the decision. Finally, She nodded slowly and led Marcus closer to the enormous trunk. Up close, Marcus could see that the dark patches on the bark were not just discoloration. They were moving slowly, like living shadows that crept across the tree's surface. When he pulled out his scientific scanner and pointed it at the patches, the readings made his eyes widen with surprise. "This isn't a disease," Marcus said with excitement. "These readings show quantum-level activity, whatever this is. It's not from your world originally." The Queen watched as Marcus carefully took samples of the dark material without harming the tree. His tools were designed to work with living tissue, and he moved with the same gentle care he had shown to the crushed flower dot as Marcus worked. Other plant people began to gather around them. They were the Queen's council, older beings whose skin had deeper green colors and whose light patterns were more complex. When they saw Marcus touching their sacred tree, their patterns flashed angry red. The council leader, a tall being with bark-like skin and golden eyes like the Queen's, stepped forward. His light patterns were sharp and aggressive, clearly telling Marcus to stop what he was doing. But the Queen stood between Marcus and her council. Her own patterns flashed back at them, brighter and more commanding. Even though Marcus could not understand their full conversation, he could tell the Queen was defending his right to help. After several minutes of heated light pattern discussion, the council reluctantly stepped back, but their angry expressions told Marcus that they would be watching his every move. Marcus spent the rest of the day studying the tree and the strange dark patches. He took readings with every tool he had, and slowly began to understand what was happening. The dark material was not trying to harm the tree, it was trying to connect with it. But something was blocking that connection. "It's a symbiotic organism," Marcus explained to the Queen as they worked together late into the evening. "Like the bacteria in human stomachs that help us digest food. This organism is supposed to help your tree, but something has interrupted their natural relationship." The Queen listened carefully, her light patterns showing deep interest. She began sharing her own knowledge through their growing light language, telling Marcus about the tree's history and the old stories of her people. Together, they discovered that the problems had started when off-world mining operations began working on the other side of the planet. The mining created pollution that had slowly poisoned the soil and air, breaking the natural cycles that the tree depended on. The symbiotic organism is starving. Marcus realized it's trying to take energy from the tree because it can't get what it needs from the environment anymore. Night fell over the garden, and the flowers around them began to glow more brightly. The Queen brought Marcus food and water, and they continued working by the soft, natural light of her plants. As they shared the simple meal, Marcus found himself watching the Queen's graceful movements and the way her eyes sparkled. When she discovered something new, Marcus began teaching the Queen about earth plants and how they adapted to pollution and environmental changes. He showed her pictures of crop rotation, companion planting, and other techniques humans had developed to keep soil healthy. The Queen was fascinated by these ideas. She began experimenting with her own plants, using her natural connection to encourage them to grow in new patterns. Marcus watched in amazement as she could make flowers bloom just by touching them and sharing her life energy. "Your people have gifts that humans can only dream of," Marcus said softly. "You can communicate directly with your plants, share energy with them, even heal them with your touch." The Queen's light patterns showed pleased colors, but also sadness through their growing language. She told Marcus that her gifts were fading as the world tree grew weaker. If the tree died, she would lose her connection to all plant life and eventually die herself. As the second sun set and the garden filled with star-like flowers that glowed like tiny moons, Marcus and the Queen sat together under the dying world tree. They had been working for hours, sharing knowledge and ideas, and Marcus felt closer to her than he had ever felt to another being. The Queen was arranging a collection of her most beautiful flowers around the base of the tree, each one glowing with different colors and singing soft melodies. The sight was so beautiful that Marcus felt his heart fill with wonder. "You know," Marcus said quietly, watching the Queen's gentle hands arrange the glowing blooms, "you're more wonderful than those flowers." The queen stopped what she was doing and looked at Marcus with surprise. Her light patterns flickered with colors he had never seen before, soft pinks and golds that seemed to dance across her skin like sunrise. For a moment, they just looked at each other in the starlight. The queen's expression was soft and happy, and she began to smile. It was the first real smile Marcus had seen from her, and it transformed her face completely. But their peaceful moment was broken by harsh red lights flashing from the direction of the palace. The Queen's council had been watching them from the shadows, and they had seen everything. The council leader stepped into the garden, his skin flashing with angry patterns. Behind him came more council members, all of them looking upset and suspicious. Their light language was sharp and accusing as they pointed at Marcus. Marcus could not understand their exact words, but their meaning was clear. They thought he was manipulating their dying queen for human political gain. They believed he was using her weakness to trick her into helping his people. The queen stood up quickly, her own patterns flashing back at her council with fierce protectiveness. But Marcus could see the doubt and pain in her golden eyes. Her people's suspicions were hurting her deeply. The council leader made a final declaration, his patterns so bright they hurt to look at. Then he and the other council members turned and walked back toward the palace, leaving Marcus and the queen alone under the dying tree. The queen looked at Marcus with sad, confused eyes. For the first time since they had met, she seemed uncertain about whether to trust him. Marcus knew that everything they had built together was now in danger. 3 days after the council's angry confrontation, Queen Lysara collapsed in her garden. Marcus was studying soil samples near the world tree when he heard the sound, like wind chimes falling and breaking. He turned to see the queen on her knees, her light patterns flickering weakly like a dying candle. The flowers around her began to dim and wilt as her life energy faded. Marcus ran to her side and carefully helped her sit up. Her golden eyes were pale and unfocused, and her skin felt cold to the touch. The connection between the queen and the dying world tree was stronger than Marcus had realized. As the tree got worse, so did she. The council members appeared quickly, their light patterns flashing with alarm and anger. The council leader pointed at Marcus and made harsh sounds, clearly blaming him for the queen's condition. Two Garvines moved forward to grab Marcus and drag him away, but the queen raised one weak hand and shook her head, even in her weakened state. She protected Marcus from her council's anger. Her light patterns were barely visible, but they were enough to make the guards step back. Marcus looked at the dying queen and made a decision that would change everything. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly. "I don't care what your council thinks of me. You need help, and I'm going to get it." That night, while the queen rested in the palace and the council held angry meetings, Marcus returned to the ship. Captain Rodriguez was surprised to see him. "Ambassador, what's happening? The plant people won't talk to us, and you've been gone for days." Marcus went straight to the ship's communication system. "Captain, I need to send a message to Earth. The strongest signal you can manage." "What kind of message?" Marcus began typing, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "A call for help. Within hours." Marcus's message was being broadcast across human space. It reached Earth, the Mars colonies, the research stations around Jupiter, and every human settlement in between. The message was simple but powerful. "This is Ambassador Marcus Chen calling all botanists, environmental scientists, soil experts, and anyone who cares about saving a dying world. I'm on Viridian Prime, and an entire civilization needs our help. Their world tree is dying, and without it, their queen and possibly their whole species will die too. I'm not asking you to come for politics or trade deals. I'm asking you to come because it's the right thing to do." The response was faster than Marcus had dared to hope. Dr. Sarah Kim, the best soil scientist on Mars, was the first to reply. "I'm coming." Her message said, "Give me 48 hours. Professor Zhang from the Amazon Research Station sent word that he was bringing samples of Earth's healthiest soil, and a team of his best students. Dr. Okafor from the African Tree Recovery Project said she was loading her ship with seeds and young plants that might help heal the damaged ecosystem. But the message that made Marcus smile came from his old teacher, Dr. Elena Vasquez. "Marcus, you crazy boy, you found the discovery of a lifetime. I'm bringing my whole lab team and every earthworm we can fit in our ship's cargo hold." Within 3 days, ships began arriving at Viridian Prime. Not just one or two, but dozens of them. Human scientists, doctors, farmers, and environmentalists came from every corner of human space. They brought equipment, supplies, and most importantly, their knowledge and willingness to help. The Chlorophyll Council was confused and suspicious. They had never seen anything like this. Other alien species who had visited their world always came wanting something in return: trade. Agreements, rare. Plants, or territorial rights. But these humans were offering their help for free. Marcus organized the human team in the crystal clearing near the dying world tree. Dr. Kim immediately began testing the soil while Professor Zhang studied the symbiotic organisms. Dr. Okafor worked with the Queen's gardeners to understand which plants were struggling most. The breakthrough came when Dr. Vasquez opened her cargo containers full of earthworms. "Every healthy ecosystem needs these little heroes," she explained to the fascinated plant people. "They break down dead material and create rich soil that helps plants grow strong." The Queen, still weak but determined to help, watched as the humans carefully introduced earthworms to the soil around the world tree. Within hours, the dark patches on the tree's bark began to change. The symbiotic organisms finally had what they needed to properly connect with the tree again. As the days passed, more changes became visible. The tree's leaves began to turn from yellow back to healthy green. Its light grew brighter and stronger. Most importantly, the Queen's own strength began to return. The human team worked around the clock, not because anyone was paying them, but because they genuinely cared about saving this beautiful world. They shared their meals with the plant people, learned basic light language to communicate better, and treated every chlorophyll being with respect and kindness. Other alien species who had been watching from a distance were amazed by what they saw. The Traders Guild sent representatives to observe these strange humans who gave away their knowledge. Instead of selling it, the Crystal Federation recorded everything, trying to understand why humans would spend their own resources to help strangers. One evening, as the world tree glowed brightly for the first time in months, the Queen found Marcus sitting in her garden. Her light patterns were strong and healthy again, dancing across her skin in complex, beautiful designs. "Your people are remarkable," she said, using the human words she had been learning. "They came so far just to help us." Marcus smiled and looked up at the tree whose massive branches now sang with healthy energy. "That's what humans do. When someone needs help, we help them. It doesn't matter if they're the same species as us or from the other side of the galaxy." The Queen sat beside him on the living wood bench. "But now we face a difficult choice," she said quietly. "Word of what happened here is spreading across the galaxy. Other species want to visit our world, to study our plants and learn our secrets. My council believes we should return to isolation to protect ourselves." Marcus nodded, understanding the difficulty of her position. "What do you believe?" The Queen looked at him with her bright golden eyes. "I believe that isolation led to our tree becoming sick in the first place. We ignored the pollution from the mining operations because we thought it wasn't our concern. But everything in the galaxy is connected, just like the plants in a garden." She stood up and walked to a patch of new flowers that the human team had helped plant. Earth roses growing next to Viridian moonbells, their different colors and scents blending into something more beautiful than either could create. "Alone I think," the Queen said slowly, "that it's time for my people to join the larger garden of the galaxy, but only with partners we can trust." Marcus felt his heart skip as he realized what she was suggesting. The Queen was ready to open her world to the galaxy, but she wanted humanity to be her people's guide and protector in that larger universe. The next morning, the Queen called her council together to announce the most important decision in her world's history. The great celebration hall of the palace had never seen anything like this before. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the living amphitheater. their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes among the glowing flowers. The Crystal Federation sent their shimmering ambassadors. The Traders Guild arrived in ships full of expensive gifts. Even the mighty Titan Empire had sent observers to witness this historic moment. All of them had come to hear Queen Lystra's announcement about the future of Viridian Prime. Marcus stood with the human science team near the restored World Tree, whose massive trunk now glowed with healthy golden light. The tree's recovery had been so complete that new flowers were blooming on branches that had been bare and dying just weeks before. The sight filled Marcus with pride, not just in what they had accomplished, but in how his people had proven themselves to the galaxy. The Queen appeared at the top of the natural stage, and the entire amphitheater fell silent. She looked magnificent in robes made from living vines and flowers, her skin dancing with complex light patterns that spoke of joy and determination. Behind her, the council members took their places, their own patterns showing they had finally accepted the wisdom of her decision. Friends from across the galaxy, the Queen began, her voice carrying easily through the natural acoustics of the hall. You have come to learn about the future of my world. For generations, my people chose isolation, believing it would keep us safe. But isolation nearly cost us everything. She gestured toward the glowing world tree. Our sacred tree was dying, and with it, our entire civilization. We had grown so separate from the galaxy that we didn't notice the poison slowly killing our world until it was almost too late. Murmurs went through the crowd as various alien species translated her words into their own languages. The Traders Guild representatives leaned forward with interest, no doubt calculating the value of exclusive trading rights with Viridian Prime. Many species have visited our world in recent years. The Queen continued. They offered us trade deals, military protection, and technological advancement. But when we needed help the most, only one species answered our call with open hearts and empty hands. She looked directly at Marcus and the human team. The humans came not as traders or conquerors, but as healers. They asked for nothing and gave us everything we needed to save our world. Marcus felt his cheeks grow warm as dozens of alien eyes turned toward him. Some of the expressions were curious, others skeptical, and a few looked almost hungry as they calculated how to use this information for their own advantage. The Queen raised her hand, and her light patterns brightened dramatically. Therefore, I announce that Viridian Prime will form an exclusive alliance with the Human Federation, not because they offered us the best deal, but because they proved they value life and beauty over profit. The reaction was immediate and loud. The Traders Guild representatives stood up with angry protests, their mechanical translators squawking complaints about unfair business practices. The Crystal Federation flickered with disapproval, while the Titan Empire observers simply watched with cold calculation. But the Queen's decision was final. Her light patterns flashed with royal authority, and her council members supported her with their own displays of unity. The massive world tree itself seemed to approve, its glow growing brighter and its branches singing in harmony. As the alien representatives filed out of the amphitheater, some angry, others already planning how to approach humanity for their own deals, Marcus found himself alone with the Queen in her private garden. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked softly. You could have chosen species with more advanced technology or stronger military forces. The Queen smiled and led him to a new section of her garden that hadn't existed before. Here, earth plants and Viridian flora grew side by side in perfect harmony. Red roses climbed alongside silver singing vines. Earth sunflowers turned their faces toward Viridian Prime's twin suns, while moonbell flowers chimed softly in their shade. This is my answer, the Queen said, kneeling beside a patch where earthworms had created rich, dark soil that supported both human and chlorophyll plants. Your species doesn't try to replace what exists. You help it grow stronger. Marcus knelt beside her and touched a small rose that was blooming next to a cluster of starflowers. Both plants seemed healthier for being near each other. They're different root systems sharing nutrients in ways that benefited both. I want to establish something here, the Queen said, her light patterns showing excitement. an interstellar botanical exchange program. Human scientists and chlorophyll gardeners working together to understand plant life throughout the galaxy, not for profit, but for knowledge and beauty. Marcus felt his heart leap with excitement. A living laboratory where different species can learn from each other. Exactly, and I want you to be the permanent human ambassador here, if you're willing. Marcus looked around the garden where human and alien children were already playing together, their laughter mixing with the songs of the flowers. Dr. Vasquez was teaching a group of young chlorophyll gardeners how earthworms worked, while Professor Jean learned to communicate with plants through bioelectrical feedback. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be, Marcus said honestly. Over the following months, news of what happened on Viridian Prime spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to see humanity in a new light, not as ambitious conquerors or clever traders, but as the species that had saved a dying world simply because it was the right thing to do. The plant-human alliance became the foundation for something larger. Species that had never trusted each other began working together on environmental projects. Inspired by the example set on Viridian Prime, the galaxy's first interspecies nature preserve was established on a neutral world, managed jointly by humans and chlorophyll gardeners. Marcus found himself at the center of this growing movement. As the permanent ambassador to Viridian Prime, he helped negotiate agreements that focused on cooperation rather than competition. Other alien species began requesting human mediation for their environmental problems, knowing that humans would work for the health of worlds rather than personal gain. One evening, as the twin suns set over the hybrid garden, Marcus and Queen Lysara walked together among the flowering vines and singing trees. The queen had taught him enough of her light language that they could have complex conversations, while Marcus had helped her learn human concepts of ecology and conservation. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked, watching earth butterflies pollinate Viridian flowers in the golden sunset light, opening your world to the galaxy. The queen paused beside a fountain where glowing fish swam alongside earth koi, their different patterns creating living art in the flowing water. Sometimes I worry about the challenges we'll face, she admitted. But then I look at this garden and remember what you told me that first night under the stars. Marcus smiled, remembering his words about her being more wonderful than the flowers. Round them, you taught me that being appreciated for who you truly are is worth any risk. The queen continued, my people were beautiful in isolation, but we're even more beautiful as part of something larger. As if to prove her point, a group of children ran past them, human, chlorophyll, and even a few young Crystal Federation beings who had come to study at the Botanical Exchange. They were playing a game that involved making patterns with bioluminescent flowers, their different abilities combining to create art that none of their species could make alone. Marcus watched them and realized that this was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not advanced technology or military strength, but the ability to see beauty and potential in others. In a universe full of species trying to prove their superiority, humans had become known as the ones who help others bloom. The garden around them glowed softly in the twilight, a living symbol of what different worlds could create together when they chose cooperation over competition. And at its heart, the great world tree sang with the voices of 1,000 species, all growing stronger together than any could grow alone.